Hello there, this is Fiona, host and main GM for What Am I Rolling, a twice-monthly RPG one-shot podcast. This is a bonus Q&A episode to tide us over to the next one-shot, and it is indeed a slightly different Q&A, as this week I had the absolute pleasure of chatting to Grant Howitt and Matt Sanders from Rowan, Rook and Decard, the UK TTRPG company behind Spire, Heart, Die the RPG, Eat the Reich, and many, many more. During the summer this year, I was lucky enough to go to Gen Con with Rowan, Rook and Decard as one of their GMs, and I got to experience firsthand their experimental take on an RPG megagame. For context, the Rowan, Rook and Decard team developed a number of large-scale scenarios using their various TTRPG systems as a base for their GMs to run. The big difference compared to, say, a normal convention game was that each GM's table could have an impact on the overarching narrative of the scenario, and therefore could interact and influence the other tables playing a scenario at the same time. I really enjoyed this experience, and I'm very grateful to both Grant and Matt for sparing the time to chat to me about it and getting their thoughts on how the games went. Folks know I'm a massive fan of Rowan, Rook and Decard games and highly recommend checking out their work. They're going to be at Dragameet happening on November 30th and PAX Unplugged December 6th to the 8th. So if you're at either of these conventions, please go check them out. And consider signing up to any Rowan, Rook and Decard megagame offerings at future conventions. They are well worth your time. I'm going to put a link to the Rowan, Rook and Decard website and all the relevant information in this episode's show notes. So we're going to start off really nice and simply. Please let the folks know at home, who are you and what do you do?
Hello, I'm Grant Howitt. I'm 1/3 of the directors of Rowan, Rook and Decard. I'm Rook, and we publish games such as Spire, Heart, Eat the Reich, and several others.
I'm Matt. I'm our professional friendly person at Rowan, Rook and Decard. I look after things like our distribution, our retail, and also our convention presence. But then I do all sorts of other things, mostly on the business side of the business, whereas Grant's from the creative side. But as you'll see when we talk about these, there is quite a lot of overlap between those sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a delight to have you both on the podcast. Grant, back again, obviously. It was nice to have you back. So this sort of chat has come about because I was lucky enough to be part of Rowan, Rook and Decard's team at Gen Con. And you folks, when we're running games and stuff like that, you actually went for a different approach. You actually started doing some mega games, which I had not really come across before. I'd not actually played in any or even run any before. But you sort of implemented this sort of idea of doing mega games for all the games that you were running, particularly at Gen Con. So the first question is, in case people aren't aware, because it is quite a UK concept. It started out as a UK concept, but what is a mega game?
So I think like an actual mega game, as opposed to what we're doing, is about 150 dorks in a church hall pretending to be the UN.
Yes.
And aliens invade, and isn't that interesting? And so it's a LARP, basically, but with generally much more structured and less in the way of social interaction and more about game mechanics interacting and creativity in that way. What we're doing for mega games, or what we're calling mega games, is 36-player games with 6 GMs and generally a central table. And this was, I think it was Matt's idea to get them going, wasn't it?
We definitely can't take full credit for it. I think it was my idea to make them roll within our RD. We are not the first people to run Rook and Decard multi-table RPGs. The Italians, I think, hold background. They've been doing it for some time. In fact, they've even run them up to 100 players. And we found mega games really as a solution to a problem. Do you want me to answer the obvious follow-up question here, Fiona, of what was the problem and how did we get there?
Go for it. Yeah. Also, who are the Italians? Who are you referring to specifically? Not just Italy.
Just broadly, Italy as an entity, government-sponsored program. No, there are a number of quite passionate fans of Heart and Spire in Italy who have run convention mega games of Heart and Spire for a number of years that we'd heard about. And did you actually get to attend one, Grant?
I turned up halfway through, and so Spire is really quite popular in Italy, which is great. But if I walk into a room where 100 people are playing Spire in the UK, most of them are going to know who I am. And that wasn't strictly true in Italy. So I walked in, and me and Chris were sort of stood there like lemons. And then they had to have the organizer go up and in Italian say, "Hello there. These are the men who wrote the game. They've just come into the room for a while." And we're sort of waving away, and we're like, "Do you want us to sign your player character sheets?" Like, yeah, sure, Grant, yeah. So we went around and signed everything. So attend is a strong word, but we definitely slowed it down.
Yeah.
So there's a few individuals there who've kind of just led within the community of players who play it in Italy and run those games. And we were aware of that. And then as we wanted to grow our presence at conventions, particularly Gen Con, we wanted to find ways we could do that we were in control of. Space at Gen Con is so competitive that you literally have to do a presentation explaining why you should get more space than you currently have, and the answer is generally no. Their space allocation system really rewards loyalty, and I actually respect that as a principle. But what it means mostly is that the exhibitors have been going for years, can get space, or people who drop enormous money on sponsorship can get space. But running games and events is just something you're allowed to do. So we decided, right, we'll do a lot more of that. Then a core principle of our business is that everyone gets paid. We've always extended this to our convention GMs, but when we decided that meant we were going to have 4 times as many of them, that got expensive fast. And the way we decided we could charge good prices for games at conventions was by running games that were spectacular and interesting and different. And the Megagames was the answer to this. This is how we run a much larger convention game with more GMs who we can pay, because the players are paying for a memorable experience, and we're hopefully providing one. So it was really a solution to how do we grow running games at conventions while still paying our GMs a fair amount of money for the skills they bring to us.
Yeah, I've got to say that. It seems like I can definitely see why no one else pays their GMs. It seems much cheaper. Or like no one pays their staff. No one pays anyone in this industry.
It was interesting because obviously I'm on a lot of newsletters and stuff, and during the lead up to Gen Con, obviously not naming any names, there was definitely a couple of RPG companies were like, hey, we're looking for GMs, and there was no mention of payment for their time. There was just like a free ticket to the con, and it's like this is 2 weeks before. If you're not already going, it feels like superfluous for what you're giving, like entry to the con, and that's it. So yeah, it definitely feels like people are aware of it, but as you said, it's cheaper not to pay for it, but actually, to give money for people who are spending their time for a very intense couple of games. Because let's say like Rowan, Rook and Decard, obviously you guys were amazing games, but it really does have that buy-in not only from the players but from the GMs as well. So then to make them into mega games as well, it is like you said, that unique experience that you can bring to it. So
running our role-playing games is exhausting. Like Chris and I, every game which we've put out is designed to be as low prep as possible. Chris and I hate doing prep, but that unfortunately means that everything happens at the table. So after about 2 hours, you really start to you're really running on fumes.
A thing I didn't know what we'd see with it is a lot of the publishers who run their games with volunteers at conventions have a GM no-show rate of somewhere like between 5 and 10%. Ours at Gen Con over the last 2 years has been 0. And that's because we're paying people and treating them right. Whereas a volunteer who hasn't had much time devoted to them can just not show up. And so I think for a lot of those folks who are doing it with volunteer GMs, it's probably a false economy even. I think paying people has made it a better experience, not just for the players, but for us running it. 10% of our GMs not showing up would have been a colossal problem to deal with.
Certainly for these big mega games, absolutely. Yeah. My question to you guys then, because obviously Rowan, all the games that you've ran, obviously Spire, Heart, Die, all that sort of thing, Orkborg as well. Can any game, do you think, become a mega game then?
Yeah.
Or is there anything that you'd need to change drastically about a certain system, would you say?
So one thing which I discover as I get older, I've been writing games since I was about 20 now. So that's nearly 20 years of doing the thing. And the older I get, the more I realize that my job is fundamentally pretty useless, in that we have to trick people into buying games, because the exciting bit is what happens at the table.
Yeah.
The exciting bit is the interaction between players. And so really, like in the experimental games we ran this year, we found out that the fewer rules there were in a game, the smoother it went. Because something like Spire, for example, the core loop of resistance where you roll for skills and then roll for stress and then roll for fallout and pick fallout, that's by necessity 3 times longer than the same thing in Orc-Borg. And so if you're trying to schedule things all happening at the same time, the more rules that are there, the more responsibility on each individual GM, the bumpier it becomes. And the exciting bits were when the players didn't use the rules, when they talked to each other around the tables, when we did little goofs and set pieces, when they got to interact with the NPC, or when they got to try and board the train to Derelictus or what have you. The actual game itself doesn't matter. And Fiona, so you were one of our GMs at Orc-Borg,
Yes.
which I'm putting down as like the victory.
The victory one.
They all went pretty well.
Yes.
The thing about Orc-Borg is that we had some real rough and tumble characters show up to GM who were really ready to fucking party, and so they started chanting immediately.
Yeah.
And like just having a room full of 30 people going doom 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 and smashing their hands on the table. I'll get you there. You could run that in the Billis.
Yeah.
You know. So like I think any game can be made to do this, but the more game there is, the harder it becomes. We're I'm putting together the list for next year at the moment, and I'm trying to focus as much on one-page games as I can. I still want to have representations for Heart and Spire in there, also because, like, hey Matt, I don't remember what was the number of requests we had to take part in the Heart games.
Well, so for pretty much all of our games, the wait list was over 100. But the Heart games, which we had 2, were 300 and 600 people in the wait list.
What?
Yeah, which is wild.
Yeah, it means we ran Heart for 60 players total, and we had, depending on how much duplication there was between the 2 wait lists, between 300 and 600 people ready and waiting for a dropout to happen, to occur.
And to pay $30 to do it as well. Which is the other thing. Like normally we only ever charge the minimum.
Yeah.
And as Matt was saying, it was solely so we could pay the GMs and make running games a viable thing. I always struggled with conventions. Never really quite got on with them. Didn't know what I was doing a lot of the time, and if I wasn't working, I was completely useless. But post-COVID, I know what they're for now. And one, it's for acquaintances, because we lost those for 2 years. Do you remember? I didn't meet any acquaintances. But 2, it's about getting people in a room together and having that essentially human experience of getting excited about the same thing. And we can't do that over the internet. We can't do that at a games. We can maybe pull it off at a gaming shop. Yeah.
It's a different platform, isn't it? It's not the same as being in the room and reading those non-verbal cues. And like you said, shouting doom, 30 people joining in and people looking and going, what the fuck is going on? It's very bonding. It's very community. Yeah.
Linking this back to the question of can you run any game as a mega game, I actually think it becomes more about the players you've got in the room. Because if you've got people who want to do that large-scale communal experience and they want to shout and they want to, frankly, cheat by poking the rules and doing kind of inverted commas naughty things and like inventing the game themselves and it all being a social experience focused on the fiction, it works.
Yeah.
I think if you've got a room full of 36 people who really want to roll to hit, then roll to hit location, and then roll on an armor table, and then on a damage table, and I don't think that experience of play or that type of player would work well in a room doing this.
No.
So you can do it with any game, I think, because most of the things that RPGs are about, you could find a way of making this work.
Sure.
Pathfinder do it. A Pathfinder scenario for this could be great.
Aren't they called epics?
5e Dungeons and Dragons, ones of these are called epics. I don't know if there is a Pathfinder version of this. I've not seen it. But that would require the right group of players, and you'd really have to work hard on the buy-in of, we're not playing Pathfinder Society here, guys.
Yeah.
This is a bit rougher and readier.
For me, because this was the first time I was GMing something not by myself, because often like UK Games Expo, etc., I would just put myself in for like free games and it's not connected to a company, so it's just me just to get my accommodation and stuff. So again, very maybe selfish to be like, right, that's paid for the accommodation, I can now do whatever I want.
Selfish?
Well, no, but like, for example...
selfish at all.
Well, no, but like,
you just
that's my goal.
described work.
Well, it is work. But also not being paid for that. That's just getting me free accommodation to go and spend more money. But what I really liked about these mega games, and I know it's more of a consequence of it rather than the purpose of it, is that suddenly you're in a group of 6 other GMs who are working together, knowing the same goal, and you're like, oh, what happened at your table? That's really cool. And just being able to talk to people directly about their games, even though you're all playing similar scenarios, but actually... I don't know, it was just interesting to suddenly be, for my first time, being a part of a GM posse of like talking to people and then just being able to, again, get those acquaintances, which I might not have made by myself. So almost forcing you to be friends with people, but it worked. Like, 'cause then we could chat to each other and go, oh, where's so-and-so? Oh, they're coming here. Okay. And then helping each other out, because if one GM doesn't turn up, then none of it works, as you were saying. So we're all there trying to work it together and also make friends for it as well. So it was just a very different experience of like working together as a team as a part of a project. It was just, I don't know, it was fun to do.
Well, so I think games conventions do this kind of wonderful thing of getting enough people together in a place to play really weird games. Like if you want to play 10 Candles in your local town, that's probably quite hard, right? But at a convention, there's enough people to find a group who want to do it. But I think with this, we're taking it a step above that. You can't just find a group of 5 people to play Spire with. You can probably pull that off if you live in a town or a city. But at home, finding 30 people and 5 other GMs for the same game and getting them all in the same place at the same time would be a hellish nightmare. At a convention, most of that logistics is done for you. Everybody's already there. They're already available. They're in the right attitude. They've brought pens and pencils and dice and everything else.
And they're there to do the thing. They're there to game. It's not like, oh, we just pop past the convention to see what's going on with the kids. It's like, no, I'm here for the weekend or I'm here for the day and I want to do the thing.
Yeah. So you've got this, like, it's the right word there, like multiple things have come together to create the perfect situation in which to do this otherwise difficult thing.
Concordance or syzygy.
Ooh,
Syzygy.
Yeah. What elements, like you sort of mentioned it before, like you need players who have the buy-in. I can imagine that GMs who obviously are passionate and know the rules a little bit, but also willing to improvise. Are there any other elements that you think would make a good mega game that sort of sells to people to get people to play it, if you see what I mean?
So I did a lot of thinking about the mega game. I think like thankfully I'm like during Gen Con, Matt and Jin, he's our other person who was there alongside me and Chris, they did a lot of the day-to-day running of the business and making sure that all the boxes are in the right places and things weren't on fire. And so I was able to really plug my head into the mega games and see how we can make those work. And I did a lot of thinking about it. And I think the challenge that we found was exactly the same problem we had when we started doing LARPs back in 2007. We started doing LARPs. We started doing zombie LARPs, and we got a bit ahead of ourselves because by the 3rd game, we had a fully realized plot, and we had our own NPCs, and we had like set pieces and things. Like the players had to infiltrate a ritual, and we had a magic system, and all of this stuff because we were like, oh, well, this is great. We want to give them more. We want to show them these things. And the most fun that I saw of any of the sessions that I was part of was when 2 players on the Orkborg mega table decided that they would rig up a tin can and some string between 2 spaceships to talk to each other, and that was nothing to do with what I said. In fact, like I didn't even like it was Zeb, one of our GMs, who suggested that they can talk to each other as long as they cheat. And the exciting bit of a mega game comes from interaction between tables. There's something strange and Matt was saying a little bit naughty, a little bit like, well, we're not supposed to talk to the tables. We're not supposed to do that. And so any time which we focused on, here's a set piece we're doing. So like, so just also to explain, because your listeners weren't there, so they probably don't know what the hell we're talking about. For Spire, so the scenario for Spire was called End of an Era. And the deal was the players had to assassinate every single member of the Spiral Council, aside from Wander the Lost, played by me, or some other guy, Fraser, I think, who was wandering around between tables doing a passable Hugh Grant impression. And generally getting knocked unconscious, and they had to keep him alive and kill the other guy, which is a perfectly fine idea for a scenario, but unfortunately it bottlenecks. So firstly, the mega game element is you talking to a GM who's going to come along and fuck up your game a little bit and do some silly things. And then there was no interaction with other tables. There was no, like, there was a bit at the end where we did sort of a ceremony and everyone became bees, but it didn't have that emergent play. So, like, I think when we do them in future, what we need to do is encourage communication between players, and anything we do should be an excuse for players to interact rather than something we are showing them.
It's realizing that the kind of most exciting bit of this is not something we orchestrate, right? It's what the players come up with when we put 36 of them in a room and say, hey, pretend to be orcs for a bit. And they figure something about that out that we probably haven't figured out ourselves. And we can take that away and work with it in the future. But like, it is essentially a very large collaborative project, and us trying to manage it too much isn't the way.
Yeah, it's hard because I know exactly what you mean. It's that sort of almost like improv thing of just letting the magic happen and letting people make mistakes and stuff like that. Because I know, like, when we got the scenarios for it, I know there was a lot of talk going like, oh, but we need to know the exact things for this and this. And in my head, as a GM, I was like, just run with it, because it's exactly what you said. Like, all you're there as a GM to do is to, you know, facilitate the story a little bit and go yes and to these players and like encourage them, because some people, like, I know certainly from my experience with the Orkborg stuff, most of the players at the table had never played Morkborg or even, you know, or any of the hacks, and so they were just like, we've just been told we should come, and then they got so excited and they enjoyed it. And then obviously I know sort of the profit for everyone here is that afterwards a lot of my players then went and bought the book, which is I know is a nice thing to sort of tick off on, but it was so good that experience. They went from not knowing anything to suddenly being a part of this big posse shouting doom, and then like going straight to going like, I want to play this again for my players, even though like it's going to be hard to recapture what they felt, but that immediate feeling was like, I must play this again. I must play an orc again, because it was just so much fun, and we had such a cool moment, a cool memory happened for us just then.
You've touched on a thing there that I don't think I realised before we did this at Gen Con. I assumed that the players who signed up to these mega games, who were paying, you know, $25, $30 for a ticket, would be people who knew the games, who had read Spire and played it, or loved reading it but not been able to play it, signing up to do it with the publishers. And actually, loads of them weren't. Loads of them were people who had browsed the Gen Con events website and gone, oh, that looks cool.
Yeah.
And signed up. They were signing up at, like, as entirely new to us or new to the specific game, and arrived with really very little in the way of expectations. And I think there's a realization there for us of, we're not writing these for hardcore fans.
No.
Actually, lots of these are being written for people who've, like you say, don't know what Merkborg is, don't know what Orkborg or any of the other related games are, or anything else RRD have done. They just show up, expect to have a good time. And they do.
Obviously, I know, like, Quinn's Quest obviously was very helpful for Heart, and obviously boosting that up. And like all reviews is very good. So often it is just people going, have you seen this review? That sounds good. And then just instantly buying a ticket to play, and not necessarily the PDF or anything to read about it, to go, someone said it was good, I'm in.
Yeah, that's a dizzying thing for me. Like, to spend 4 hours just having a go at something for $30.
But I like that, I guess, because and again, Gen Con and conventions in general as the way to do it, because obviously if you do that at home, I always bring up this comparison of like board games, like you can have a terrible time with a board game, but by the end of it you're like, I understand how it plays now, I'll play it again. Whereas an RPG, I do find people go, we don't need to play this again, because it takes that time and commitment. It takes maybe a bit more out of you than a board game does. But when you go to Gen Con, you've already gone, well, I'm here, I'm going to try it. And then afterwards you can be like, I had this really wild time with something called Orkborg, and then telling to other people. So instantly that word of mouth becomes a lot easier, and you're already there. That sort of, that prep of like, oh, I have to act. It's already like, well, it's a kind of almost like an expectation perhaps at these cons, perhaps.
I think even lots of people going to Gen Con are going with discovery in mind. They're not looking like, if you've played lots of Call of Cthulhu, do you go to Gen Con to play Call of Cthulhu, or do you try to play something new? And I think that's probably true for our players too. We are getting loads of people who haven't played our games signing up to them because they're curious. And I actually wonder whether our customers, like, who already own all of our games and run them regularly, I think maybe they go and play other people's games at Gen Con.
Probably.
Rather than ours. And there is a a higher percentage than I ever would have guessed of people playing entirely new things to them, because that's what they've paid to go and do, right? You pay all this money to go to Gen Con, which as a net cost is a couple of $1,000s for hotels and travel and food and time off work and everything else before you buy anything.
Yeah.
Right? And I think that means people are going to try things out and come home with new information and new things they want to do, rather than playing their favorite game again.
With strangers and in like something, another element that might be
in a windowless room.
Yeah, with the lights going out at random points. Yeah,
it was exciting.
What would you say was the most challenging part of running and organising the Mega Games that you can talk about? If there is any challenges, or was it all plain sailing?
Well, so I think I can give an organisational answer for this,
Please.
and I think I can probably give a running answer.
Yeah.
Space is the biggest challenge for us, because we're organising from the UK and coming to Gen Con, having filled out a form and seen a room on a floor plan that's allocated to us, and thinking that's fine, and you arrive and discover the table configuration is different to you thought it was. I feel like some degree of that is inevitable, but also fairly minor. Like, I think like that was not as had been planned, but actually the games were more resilient to it than I expected.
Space was a challenge, and I think like because these are the sort of things you'd struggle to run outside of a games convention, or you'd struggle to run outside of a society or London. You could probably run one in London just by the number of people who are there, but you'd struggle to do this. So space is obviously a limitation, because you're going to be operating in a shared environment which you don't have full control over. For me, the biggest challenge was timing. I actually want to briefly mention a game which we haven't really discussed, which is Die. Kieran ran D36 Dragon Meat last year, which was kind of the first mega game we'd done. And that is a much more focused performance. The plot of D36 is an evil version of Kieran Gillen captures the real Kieran Gillen, I think.
The fact you don't know it instantly makes it more interesting.
He gives it a lot of this. He had so there was an evil version of Kieran Gillen captures the real Kieran Gillen, and he wanders around wearing the Eye of Sauron on his head, making rude demands of all the players and trapping them in a magical game. But there is a to the minute schedule for how that game works. So like the first hour is character gen.
Yeah.
And then even that's broken down into in-character generation and out-of-character generation. And then everything's very structured. And like the last 10 minutes of the game are minute to minute. It's kind of fun. I can recommend it. I'm a summonable NPC in the game. That is different from the approach that we took with the games which we wrote, which we wanted something much looser. I think possibly out of laziness, and possibly because, again, prep. I didn't want to do all that prep. I wanted to come up with some interesting scenarios, let some people have some cool times together, and join those together as best we could. And that meant that anyone who basically had their hand on the rudder of the game was trying to, without interrupting, keep a handle on 6 simultaneous games of Spire and also NPC in one of those games at once, and try not to make try to appear in the right order and try to make sure everyone was having a good time. And I think part of the reason why I GM so much is I am absolutely dedicated to making sure everyone has a nice time. And so I started to feel quite self-conscious about this because effectively I was in charge of the room, and if there's a person who's looking a bit down and glum or isn't having fun, I want to run over and go, no,
what's wrong?
There's a goblin and he's got 3 feathers in his ears and his name is Twinge, and that sort of thing. And so like I felt quite responsible for that, possibly because I wrote part of the scenarios and it's my name on the books and what have you. But there is an element of it can be a bit stoppy-starty. It can be a bit weird to get everything going. And the traditional way which Mega Games do this is they don't really have refs in the same way.
No, absolutely.
Like it will be player-led, creative, or discussions. So it will be like, right, well, we need to work out what we're doing about the aliens. Get Japan on the phone, as opposed to describing a situation and acting them through.
Because out of those other games, like you said, Die, because it has that 2-step character creation is like meta on meta, and maybe has a more serious tone than the other games. Not saying the other games can't have serious tones, but it
definitely does.
But you're right. It feels more like a performance piece that has certain bits have to happen at a certain time. So it's a different beast to wrangle for sure.
Here we should actually credit Kieran here because in fact the first mega game we ran as RRD was the D36 mega game, and that idea Kieran already had it. Right, and so when we kind of started talking about doing mega games, it wasn't like we suggested this and Kieran went off and made one. It already existed, and Kieran has done similar things with panels at conventions where the panel is a game about being on a panel.
Fiona was on one of those.
Well, there we go.
Yeah,
it was me, Fiona, and Kieran's favourite audience member.
Yeah, it worked really well.
And that format kind of was something that Kieran already had in mind, and so then it just linked up nicely when we talked about doing the larger convention games.
Yeah, because that instantly, again, like you said, like that sort of the way it's presented as a game. So it makes it feels like a natural progression into the mega game. So it totally makes sense that that's what would be the one that you would sort of start off with. So I thought, but it does have that more serious tone to it. So that. Because I've ran Die, I've read the comments, all that sort of thing. So then to have people sign up to it, go, this sounds fun, and then have a very serious, not traumatic, but possibly, so like it's interesting on that front as well. That any of the mega games you could have a really cool experience from. But again, if you're not sure about what the game is, suddenly you're like, wow, that was really good, but incredibly deep for a Saturday afternoon. Or that's what I felt.
Kieran says goodbye to every player. After D36, he stands by the door and he gives you the full girlfriend experience, basically, of like, oh, thanks for coming. Did you have a nice time? What happened in your game? That sort of thing.
Yeah.
Whereas if I could buy smoke bombs legally in Indiana, I'd throw one down and run out the room the second we time out. Done. Bye. I want to try and maintain the mystique, but Kieran does aftercare in his games. Like it is a much more structured, layered performance which the players are taking part in, and it's almost akin to something like a Punch Drunk or a Sleep.
That's what I was thinking. Yeah, Punch Drunk or any immersive sort of theatre. Yeah.
Whereas we're just playing 6 games of D&D in the same room and yelling.
Yeah.
which is different ways to approach the same problem.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think it's also worth mentioning there, actually, talking about the Kieran panel makes me think about this. When we ran games at Gen Con last year, I think Grant was running 3 or 4 games at Gen Con last year.
Yeah, just 3. I did 3 one-page games, yeah.
So that's 3 games, 6 players a pop. 18 people got to meet Grant at Gen Con, where there are 70,000 people. And that feels very much like a bottleneck, where there's a lot more people who would like to meet the writer of their games and play games with them. And we can do signings on the stand, but that's quite a sort of slightly more commercial interaction, where it's like, right, sign my book. There's not there's not a shared experience and a memory there of when you did something together. And so in scaling these up to being a 36-player game, you don't get the same amount of interaction, but everybody gets to have played a game with the person that wrote it. This year, Kieran ran for 72 players at Gen Con, which is still, compared to 70,000, it's still a fraction of a percent, but it's a lot more than 18.
And I touched a lot of people's faces.
There we go.
That must count. I decided Captain Wonder the Lost inspected people like horses.
Amazing.
So I kept opening their mouth and looking directly at their teeth, and most people were into it.
We said create memorable experiences. And
that's what it was. Yeah, lots of people have that core memory. That's a result. Because I've had that in the past as well, where I've had books signed or gone to it, and it's you have the typical small talk like, how's the signing been going? Are you enjoying the con? And people are probably dead inside by this point, so it's not the same. Like you said, it is a commercial thing. They're there. It's nice to be like, I really enjoyed your book, and that, I know game designers always appreciate that, but it is a bit like, I've heard that 100 times today. I'm tired. I want a book, etc.
I'm great. Fuck
I know.
Off.
Yeah, exactly. Whereas, as having that interactive experience that is unique to your thing. Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's exciting to see that. And actually, as I said, being a GM for the first time and seeing that happen in the room and going, oh, this is really cool. And then thinking about, like you said, Punch Drunk and any of the improv scenes where you can do that. It's just an exciting thing that I think hopefully more and more TTRPGs or companies will think about doing, because again, it's such a unique experience that you can take away and going, I played this game of Spire, and now I really want to get invested into the lore. I really want to get into like what is hard, and actually that sort of jumping off point into RPGs that aren't the big dragon whose birthday is this year. You know what I mean? Like it's just a different experience to experience these other RPGs.
We do have some stores who are hoping to try and do it. There are, of course, like some like suitably large stores or suitably motivated stores who are keen on trying to run an event like this for like bring a load of, Spire into stock, get 6 of your GMs who like regularly hang out or work at the store to run it and get a bunch of people to play it and then hopefully buy Spire and it kind of kick off like a community around that game in the store. We've got work to do on the scenarios before there's something that we share with the world as a polished product rather than a...
All of the Orkborg maps were done in Sharpie on bits of cardboard, I found. Which were perfectly functional, but maybe we can't distribute those.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that was a really good format to have them in at the event because, like you said, like, the least formal aspects of it worked really well.
Yes.
But they're not something we can give to a store and say, hey, what you need to do is make up your own maps and draw them on cardboard with Sharpie. Then there's got to be a general consumption version of this. But I think it is something we want to... Like, we can run a certain amount of these at conventions, but that's still not very many. Yet there are other conventions we don't go to where I think people would run them. I know that some of our Gen Con GMs are talking about doing this themselves, and there are stores that can do it. And I think it's a much more exciting RPG experience than most first-time RPG events that stores or conventions run.
I agree. And yeah, just to go back to it, I think, because as you've always sort of said that, like, both the Dragon Meet, D36, and then obviously Gen Con, they're all experimental. Like, you're just testing it, and I feel there's a willingness at these conventions to go, fuck it, let's try it. We're gonna see what this is like, and be like, I was one of the first people that tried out this scenario, and there it is on the shelves in 2 years' time. So I think people are more forgiving because they realize, like, you're in a big room in a big convention hall which is super loud, and they're like, okay, it's on bits of paper. Fuck it, that's fine. People are willing to have like tape around things, like it's they don't mind that. Whereas I agree, if you go to like a store, it feels like now we need to elevate it a little bit to be like, this is it's not, because I think people's expectations shift depending on where they are. Like we said before, that idea of discovery. People are very happy to discover things that are on cardboard in a convention center, even though they've paid like thousands of pounds to be there. They're like, yep, we get that. Whereas, go to their own store where they might not buy anything. They're like, oh, is it on a bit of cardboard? So I definitely see that expectation shift in depending on where you are and your comfort levels as well.
Like, it's acceptable for us to run a beta thing, right?
Yes.
We can run a product in development at a convention, and there it's an exciting peek behind the scenes into a thing that's being worked on. Whereas when a store runs it, it's supposed to be a ready, packaged thing.
Mine's
the
a Fandelver.
expectations.
Yeah, like mine's a Fandelver, like a starter set ready to go. My final question then to you folks then, if, like, obviously, like, you've had this sort of experience of Gen Con, and like you said, other people are talking about doing it and you're thinking about doing it at stores. If people wanted to do their own mega game of any RPG system, like you said, any RPG could be a mega game, what's your one top bit of advice you would give to people thinking about doing their own mega game from your own experience? I appreciate, like you said, you're not original in this or anything like that, but like from your own experience, what you think?
We've done some, and we're here to talk about it.
That's what I mean. Because sometimes people are like, I don't have any top tips, just do it, But I just wanted to add I don't have any top tips, just do it, But I just wanted to add, out of interest, what would be your top tip for running your own mega game of this sort of an RPG? Make
it simpler than you think it needs to be, is my advice. The more bits you put in, the more, and that's my advice for writing anything, really. But the more bits you put in, the more things players are going to miss. And especially if you're just doing it for a convention scenario and it's not going to be distributed widely, the majority of things you write are not going to come into contact with the players. So if you can pare it down to 6 things, then they're sure as fuck going to have to see some of them. But the more complicated it makes it, the more organization you need to do between tables, and the more and the easier it is to break, the more things there are in movement. So 1, make it simple, and 2, give the players a central thing they can do together. Get the tables to talk to each other. If you can limit that in some way, that's kind of fun. So it's something they have to earn in game, or it's like, we found this handout, we'll give to the other table so we can do that. Or if there's mechanics for joining tables up. But the reason that people are excited is because it says 36 players on the top. And if you end up just playing a 6-player game in a loud room, that's not as much fun.
So we went from running single table games to running 6 table games for reasons that were nothing to do with designing the game. They were organizational aspects. They were, this is what space we believe we've got at this convention center. And I'd say that if you were trying to get that going in a store or your local library or something smaller, I'd say start smaller. I think that in a small store, like my local game store can hold 4 RPG tables if no one is playing anything else.
Yeah.
and that's not even all tables of a GM plus 6. That would be like 25 people and it'd be rammed. So work to a scale that you can realize. Don't think that, 50 people or 36 people is the target. Actually, I think there's probably really satisfying experiences out there where you do this with 3 tables of 4 people.
I was going to say, yeah.
Like that could still be something really exciting and fun that you could organize way more easily. I think getting 12 people together, that's a Blood on the Clock Tower game, right?
Yes. Yeah.
So anywhere you can do Blood on the Clock Tower, you can probably pull this off with the right sort of approach to it.
Oh, thank you guys so much. I very much appreciate you taking your time out of your day to chat to me about Megagames and like what your thoughts, because like I said, it was something very brand new to me in all senses of the term and running it and stuff like that. So yeah, I'm very excited to see what else you guys will do in the future, if it's something that you're going to do in the future.
We're thinking bigger games, bigger games with 100 players, and smaller games where we make you cocktails.
Oh, I like it, one-on-one.
Yeah, pretty much, yeah.
Where can we find out more about, obviously, Rowan, Rook and Decard work? Is there any exciting plans you got coming up for the new year? Where can we find you on social medias?
You can find us, Rowan, Rook, Decard, on social medias. If you're still scrubbing around those, you can go to rrdgames.com and find all of our games. We've got about 150 now, I think. Most of them are a page long, but there's still loads on there, and many of them are free. And in terms of what we've got coming up in the new year, we hopefully have a fascinating announcement coming in February. A really wonderful, juicy announcement, which the ink isn't wet on yet, so we can't talk about it. But the Kickstarter for Royal Blood will have finished probably fairly soon after this episode goes out. But we're allowing late pledges, so please back Royal Blood. Royal Blood is a overhauled redesign of a tarot heist game I wrote in 2016. It's we're having all new art from Mana Project Studios, a new tarot deck specially commissioned where the wands are crowbars.
Oh, that's pretty good.
Yeah, it's pretty sweet. It's a one-shot game with, again, 0 prep. So you all sit down at the table, you do a tarot card spread, which describes your heist, and then players who are playing the court cards from a deck of tarot are attempting to steal power from the major arcana with back pockets full of illegal magic.
Very, very good. And any conventions confirmed that you guys are going to in the new year at all? Or is that still all up in the air?
We'll be at Gen Con, I guess.
Well, I guess, yeah.
Yeah, we'll be at Gen Con again.
In terms of actually booked for next year, Gen Con is the only consumer show we've got booked. Nothing else yet, but that'll come. The window for booking most of them hasn't opened up.
That is
We
fair.
will have one after this episode, though. After this episode comes out, we're going to be at PAX Unplugged, which is our first appearance there.
Exciting.
And I'm quite excited about that.
Yeah, no, I'm very excited. Unfortunately, I won't be there, but yeah, have a great time. That's going to be pretty cool, I think.
Oh, I mean, Matt says we. It's Matt and a suitcase full of books.
Classic. It's hawking them outside Gen Con Convention Centre.
We couldn't get any table space.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Well, thank you so much, guys. This has been an absolutely wonderful interview. And yeah, best of luck with everything.
Thank you very much.
Goodbye.
Bye.
I'm hoping to do more of these special Q&A bonus episodes in future, including Q&As on the one-shots we've run here at What Am I Rolling? If you have a question or think of an RPG designer you'd like to see interviewed on this podcast, just let us know. Our email address is whatamirollingpodcast@gmail.com. And that's it. Great. See you next time.